Defensive ideas. Defensive ideas consist of battlefield commissions, military drill, improved maneuver, regimental system, defensive mentality, supply trains, improved foraging, and the finisher. So, battlefield commissions, +1 yearly army tradition. Note that this is sort of explicitly weaker than the equivalent one from, for example, nobility ideas, which gave you effectively, -1 decay is very nearly the same as +1 yearly. But the noble one gave you this to not only army but also navy, whereas this one only gives you army. Now, how do you use high army tradition well? Well, high army tradition increases your land morale, which helps you win fights. It increases your morale recovery rate, which helps you recover after a fight, or helps your armies raise up to full maintenance once you either get declared war on and your maintenance goes up, or you manually raise your maintenance. It helps your manpower recovery rate, and it also helps provide a siege speed bonus. So it's a bunch of little diffuse bonuses. The second idea, and here's the biggie for defensive ideas, the real meat of this idea group. +15 Morale of Armies. In the early to mid-game, aside from military technologies that give you a tactics increase, or access to a significant number of extra pips on your units, this is going to be morale, that is going to be the deciding military factor most of the time. So in the early to mid game, this bonus is a very, very significant bonus. Mid to late game, it sort of slowly transitions from morale to discipline, but even then morale is still terribly useful in that it allows you longer reinforcement times. Your armies stay in the fight longer because they've got more morale, giving you more time to throw in extra reinforcement stacks behind to hopefully grind out the enemy, even if you're suffering slightly more losses than them. Next, land leader maneuver. Well, it helps you guarantee an extra pip on your land leaders, generals and conquistadors, and it potentially allows you to overflow if you get enough random pips assigned to maneuver that with this bonus pip it will overflow into another category. Land maneuver, what does it do? Why would you want it? Well, it increases the speed which your army moves from province to province, which can allow you to have a hunter stack that can actually chase down and catch and beat up enemy stacks. Alternatively, on the other side, if you've got really high maneuver, you can run away more quickly than the enemy can hunt you. So it lets you avoid unfavourable engagements. It helps to prevent crossing penalties for rivers. You can't avoid... I don't think you can avoid the one when you're jumping between islands, but you can avoid rivers and so forth, so that helps. So it is, in some way, it's also a direct combat buff if in certain circumstances. And it also helps improve your army recovery rate of reinforcements. So when you're in a province you don't directly control, your reinforcement rate goes down. It's highest in your own land, 100%. It's slightly less in your subjects, and it's the least in provinces that are either wasteland or, well, not wasteland, not occupied by anyone or controlled by someone who is hostile to you, or even someone who isn't you that just isn't hostile, that you just got military access through. But in any case, this helps raise that recovery rate back up towards 100% that you get back at home, which can help prevent, or it helps keep your army at full fighting strength even in enemy lands, when deep in enemy lands and engaging in a series of fights. It can help prevent nasty attrition siege ticks from reducing a sieging army's numbers down below the point of being able to complete a siege. So say you stick a stack on top of a fort that's only just able to siege it, and they suffer a negative attrition tick and the end of the month tick, and that brings them down below the number that would let them siege. They might never recover if the land has a high enough attrition to counteract your reinforcement rate. If your reinforcement rate is raised because you have a high maneuver, then you might overcome that and be able to actually keep your army large enough to siege the fort without needing to do tedious micro-moving extra units across every once in a while to make up for the ones that are getting lost. Next, Regimental System, -5% land maintenance modifier. Your existing armies have reduced maintenance cost, which either you can use as a direct saving to your bottom line, or, more likely, you can use it to run an even larger army. pretty easy to understand economic buff. Defensive mentality, minus 10% fort maintenance and plus 20% fort defense. So it makes maintaining your forts less economically taxing, which is, well, typically I try to run with almost none or very, very few forts aside from a couple of very tactically important locations. But forts, and the reason I do that is because forts are so expensive to maintain. This helps make forts less expensive to maintain, though not by a huge amount, only a sort of modest amount. So this encourages you to use forts, and the other half of the bonus also encourages you to use forts by giving them plus 20% fort defense. So when your enemy is sieging them, it takes your enemy longer to siege them because your fort defense is higher, so their effectiveness at siege, the rate at which siege ticks occur, instead of occurring every 30 days, it might take them 33. Which gives you extra time to siege race them, it gives you extra time to build up an army to come and smack them away from your fort, it gives you time to move your army from some further away location towards the fort that they're sieging. It's nice, and at the very worst, even if you're not running any additional forts, it will still be a bonus for your capital fort. So that's useful. Supply trains. 33% increase to reinforce speed. This is really useful. As was already described in the land leader maneuver idea, reinforce rate is useful for helping you keep your army at full fighting strength, even in high attrition lands, even in enemy lands, even in lands where you're exceeding that province's force limit. It lets you potentially avoid sieges that would otherwise need you to do tedious micro to keep the minimum of units needed on the siege to progress, but not get have that number decreased by the attrition that they suffer from siege ticks and from the attrition on the province. So this is lovely. I think this is underestimated by most fairly new to medium players. Improved foraging, minus 25% land attrition. Well, this sort of combos well with the reinforced speed and with the high land maneuver to help minimize the attrition you receive, which helps you conserve manpower, which helps you look stronger. Yeah, it's basically and also receiving less attrition means you don't have to pay to reinforce the losses. So it is also an economic bonus. It's an economic bonus and a manpower bonus. Finally, the finisher, plus 1 attrition for enemies. Increasing the attrition for enemies can help reduce their manpower and thus their war willingness. However, keep in mind the AI gets caps on how much attrition they can receive. So if you salt the earth, or whatever it's called, burn down the I think it might be called Salt Province. Anyway, there's an interaction that your armies can take that helps increase the attrition in a province, but it reduces its prosperity and stuff. If you had that on a very low force limit province with a nice big fort and a low force limit supply for that province, you might think you'd be able to help the rate at which the enemy is losing manpower in that province, but it does cap out, so it's only of so much use against the AI. Keep that in mind. So in summary, defensive ideas. Defensive ideas provides a series of bonuses aimed at minimizing attrition, ensuring your army is kept fully reinforced while increasing the attrition your enemy receives. Attrition and its mitigation for yourself and increase for your enemies are sort of the theme of this idea set, as well as the all-important Morale of Armies bonus.